This episode of The Unstarving Musician is powered by Bandzoogle, helping musicians around the world create professional artist websites. I somewhat recently moved my own artist website over to Bandzoogle. You can see it at robonzo.com. I'm a longtime WordPress user and website designer, so trying a system like Bandzoogle was kind of a big deal to me, but I know that WordPress ain't that easy to learn, and lots of musicians have no interest in learning how to use WordPress, but will try something purported to be easy to use. Well, it doesn't get much easier than Bandzoogle. I've talked about the numerous features they have at the front end of other episodes, but after talking to Dave Kuhl, VP of Business Development with Bandzoogle, I learned about several other features that are especially interesting right now, such as crowdfunding, subscriptions, donations, and all of that without fees added. They also have tools to help you sell merch, tickets to your shows, build your email list, and more. They have support 7 days a week. So look, go to bandzoogle.com to start a 30-day free trial. You can use the promo code ROBONZO to get 15% off your first year. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code ROBONZO, ROBONZO. This episode is powered by ConvertKit. More than just an email marketing company, ConvertKit is focused on landing pages too, giving beginner creators the ability to build email subscriber lists. I've been using ConvertKit since early 2016. Their new free plan allows creators to make unlimited landing pages and forms. Choose from multiple templates, add personalization and design, include an incentive email, create a thank you page, manage subscribers, and send broadcast emails. Plus, you'll get access to the ConvertKit community page where you can join groups, follow topics, post questions, comments, and interact with other creators. To connect with your audience and to make a living doing the work you love with ConvertKit, go to morningtempo.com/convert. Let's do the show. Welcome back to another episode, my rebellious donuts. I don't even know what that is, but I hope it comes with sprinkles. I'm your host, Robonzo. On this podcast, I have conversations with independent music artists and industry professionals intended to help indie artists be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. Do you want to help others find this podcast? You can do so by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. It really does help. The Unstarving Musician podcast is made possible through the generosity of listeners like you. One of the easiest ways to offer support is to join the Unstarving Musician community, and you can do so by going to unstarvingmusician.com and join right there on the homepage. As a member, you'll receive from me tips and lessons you can use in your music journey. And this is not just stuff coming from me and my years of experience as a gigging musician, but also from the hundreds of other musicians I've talked to as part of this project and podcast. You'll also get a free copy of the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs ebook, and that is all free just for being part of the community. To learn more about the other ways of offering your support, please visit our sponsor page at unstarvingmusician.com/crowdsponsor. If you are not yet a member of the Unstarving Musician community, you may not know that I interviewed the CEO of Bandzoogle, Stacey Bedford. I did that on my Morning Tempo business podcast. You know I'm a big fan of Bandzoogle the platform. Now I'm a fan of Bandzoogle the company too. You will be as well, should you choose to listen to our conversation. There's a link in the show notes for this podcast episode with me and Stacey, or you can search for Morning Tempo hosted by me, which in this case would be Roberto R. Hernandez as opposed to Robonzo. Confused yet? Stacey will be episode number 31 of the Morning Tempo podcast. If you like that podcast, please be sure to subscribe and please tell a friend. All right, my guest for this episode is Dave Carion. He's a longtime friend from the San Francisco Bay Area. We know one another by way of mutual musician friends, and he had attended many of my gigs while I was in that music scene. He is a student musician of one of my bandmates. He picked up the bass not terribly long ago. We talk about this, and soon after was leading his own cover band called Severe Pleasure, which he still plays with today. He's always getting interesting and otherwise great gigs. He's a big supporter of my playing and this podcast and keeps me up to date on his goings-on in the music scene. He's part of the Unstarving Musician community, which is a large part of why we stay in touch. And Dave is really into the success of his band. He markets to a great personal network he has, consistently books nice gigs, and he's always giving thought on how he can get even better gigs. Recently, he detailed ideas he had for improving the band's promo materials and on-stage experience, which we talk a bit about. He's been working on gig prospects in Hawaii as of late because he got stuck there during the beginning of the COVID-19 thing we've been going through, and as we all wait for a return to live music and IRL or in real life events. We spent a few minutes talking about some of the characters who provide the backdrop for my Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs, and I'm reminded of how incestuous the Bay Area music scene I was involved in was and still is. I'm reminded also that Dave really cares a lot for the players of his band, always has, and I think that extends to everyone he works with and for, including venues, agents, audience, etc. He shares some of the old school tricks that have helped him and his band get the good gigs. It's good stuff, really. Here is me and my good friend Dave to Carion.
Okay, so let's start. Now, how long have you been involved in music?
Hey, dude, I'm asking the questions.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
But to answer your question, since I was about, well, let's see, I started playing at about 13 and did not play my first paying gig until I was about 24, 25. But I was playing a lot of, parties and things. Anyway.
Yeah, so that's interesting because a lot of people get into music as a result of an exposure in grammar school.
And I did not, my mother, my single mom, and my older brother did not want me to join band at school. I had an older brother who had a stint in music that went a little sour, and I don't know what they wanted me to do. I couldn't do sports, couldn't do band. Then I just got in trouble and smoked a lot of pot instead.
Must have been intellectual pursuits.
Yes. Are you in Hawaii, or did you make it back to the SF Bay area?
We got back a little over a week ago on a Thursday. Got in at midnight, and it was Hawaii. It was pretty much shut down by, actually several weeks before we left to come back. But we were frightened to come back because we keep reading about all these new cases in Santa Clara County. Yeah. And in Hawaii, they were having very, very few.
Oh, that's
so good we thought, it's crazy to go back home now. Why not just stay here?
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Well, I'm glad you made it back, and it sounds like you guys are all safe.
Yeah, everything is fine. And in fact, I worked on getting some gigs when I was over there, and I brought over some brochures and some tangible items to grease the skids, so to speak. And we'll get into that later if you want. But
absolutely,
I put some brochures together and circulated them. And fortunately, everybody says, "Well, we're not booking any gigs right now because we don't know how long it's going to last and all that." I said, "Well, I know that, but here it is, and I'll be calling you when this is over and done with." And they said, "Well, yeah, this looks promising, so we'll definitely take a look at it." So we'll see.
Well, it's good. I wonder if not many people were doing that. I spoke to one of our mutual friends, Gary Mahan, and he was kind of one of the recipients of what are you doing differently right now? And he said he was calling. This was it's maybe been 3 weeks now, but he said I'm calling all the venues that we played at, and the ones we were going to play at, and it's kind of schmoozing with him, letting him know he's looking forward to coming back. He had commented that it was going to be a big season for Blind Pilots. I assumed we were talking about at the moment when he and I spoke, or when he was talking about that, but maybe just for all the things he has going on. Is he actually? I don't recall. Is Gary playing in your band, Severe Pleasure?
Yeah, he's our lead guitarist. I'll tell you how that happened, or maybe I already did, but I don't recall. You can let me know. But about, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago now. I know it was in May. It was 2 years ago. Rex, who was our lead guitarist, lead singer, sent an email to all of the guys in the band, and I assume other people as well. And he says, "Boys, I'm moving back to Ohio where I grew up." He said, "I got great memories of growing up as a kid there and riding my bicycle and playing golf." And he was an absolutely superb football player. He was all league quarterback in high school.
I did not know
And
that.
yeah, and he's pretty short, so this is an amazing thing for a guy of that height to be able to perform well. And so in any case, he says, "I'm moving back there because," he said, "all I've got here is my pension and my Social Security, and I can't afford to buy a house." So he said, "My mother has offered to sell me a house she has overlooking a lake, and it's a beautiful home. I've been there and stayed there." And he said that it's only $450,000, and that I can afford. So he says, "I'm going to be moving." And so we came over and helped him pack and said, "Oh, too bad you're going." And so he moved, and we waved goodbye to him. And 5 days later, we get another email saying, "Boys, this didn't work out. Coming back." And so in the meantime, I had asked Gary, who was our rhythm guitarist, to come in and come in as lead and lead vocalist as well. So Gary accepted. So when Rex came back, we weren't able to, we didn't want to say, "Well, Gary, we're, sorry, but, Rex is back." So, but anyway, Rex became our substitute and plays with us when somebody isn't able to make it. But Gary is our lead vocalist, lead guitarist. So that's a long-winded answer to your question.
It is. It's okay. I recall this, and I didn't realize it was only 5 days that he had turned around and came back.
Yeah.
I was going to say it must have been an odd situation, but Gary and Rex kind of traded in that. I know Gary was at one time a sub for the band, but the awkward business I was thinking of, again, I wasn't there for all of it. I talked to them regularly, but I've not really talked to them about the drama of your band coming back. But I was just thinking, well, here they play in another band together. But yeah, it's not the first time though, because we had an experience. I had an experience playing with both of them in a different band that you know about, and then one day Gary wasn't in the band. So, but anyway, we're all good friends, and I'm glad.
Well, I believe you played in our band when we did a gig at a private home in Los Gatos or Saratoga. I guess it's Los Gatos. And Gary was playing with us, and so was Rex, I believe. Gary came in for Steve, and Rex was playing lead then. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so I know you've played with all these guys, and I really enjoy it. These guys are such great musicians, as you are, and I totally enjoy getting up there on the stage and making some music.
Yeah, they are. They are a fun group, and yeah, I do have memories of playing that private event that was just Gary. Was it was Gary and Rex?
Yeah, I can't remember.
Right, and then
the thing I remember most about that gig is the bartender having to duck because our host had this new drone that he was testing out, and he flew it up right over the bartender's head, and it hit the ceiling and crashed down on him.
I forgot about that. That is unfortunate. Would have been crazy. Yeah. So you're back in the Bay Area.
Right.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, and I guess before I ask you this next question, I wanted to, for the benefit of my listeners, just to let them know something about you that they wouldn't otherwise, is that you've been a big supporter of the podcast and of me as a player, a musician, from our time in the Bay Area together. And I really appreciate that. And we stay in touch largely because you're one of the Unstarving Musician community subscribers, and you often have feedback or thoughts to share based on the stuff. And I really appreciate all of that a lot.
Hey, you're quite welcome.
When I wanted to ask you, one of the reasons, if I think back, there's a lot of different things that we've talked about, but one that made me probably ask you to come on here a second time was that you picked up the bass guitar not a super long time ago, and from my perspective, you immediately got your cover band Severe Pleasure playing really good gigs and otherwise really fun gigs very quickly, and that's just kind of grown and grown, and obviously it's come screeching to a pause as opposed to a halt, I guess, but because of the situation we're all in right now. But and there was something you had said, I don't know what, maybe we talked about you had brought up your age a couple of times in emails, and but with the passing emails, you had all these great things on the horizon with the band, in spite of any frustrations that you might have been feeling with maybe venues or things constantly changing in terms of the places that you could play. But when did you start playing bass?
I started on my 67th birthday, and my wife asked me what I wanted as a birthday present. And I said, well, I've always wanted to play music. How about buying me a bass? So she bought me a used Mexican Fender, and I started taking lessons. And I took lessons for about not quite 2 years. And at the end of that time, Steve, who's still my instructor, said, well, dude, this is going pretty well. Why don't we have a concert and invite everybody? And so that's what we did. And I got my best friend from back in the 70s, who is a tennis pro. He's also a scratch golfer, and he's also a great rock drummer. And his brother, who's the same, and also a great sax player. So they came out, and then Steve, of course, since he knew Rex and Alan, he got those guys. And so we decided, instead of just playing, let's put a name to this group. So I gave it some thought, and I came up with Severe Pleasure. So 2 years after I started taking lessons, we had my debut concert. So that was kind of how it happened, and it was a lot of fun. So I asked the guys, I said, "Are you guys, interested in continuing this?" And they said, "Well, the ones that lived here said, yeah, that's cool." So I started getting gigs, and it took off from there.
And I know almost all the characters in this play. And I guess your bass instructor included, and we played together as well. What a pleasant group of guys you've got. One or more of them are full-time pro musicians. A couple of them fall in the semi-pro status, and I don't know where you categorize yourself. Are you just kind of just having fun, or to me you're kind of in there in that semi-pro status with some of your bandmates, just based on the time that you spend playing. But those guys play, as you mentioned earlier, at a pretty high level, and they just enjoy playing, and they enjoy hanging out with each other and with you, obviously. So you had quite possibly started playing I was trying to remember today when we actually met. My memory is that we met at a Blind Pilots gig. I was playing with them when I was kind of a new member of that band. Is that accurate, or did we meet before then?
I can't swear it was a Blind Pilots gig, but it was very likely that, because I didn't hang with any of the other bands much. It probably was, and I do remember you playing. And the thing that was so unusual to me about it, not only was your playing quite different from most of the drummers that I have experienced, but also you sang as well as played, and I only know one other drummer that sings while he plays. Of course, my extent of my knowledge of other bands is not huge because I haven't been around that long. Playing and going to other guys' gigs. But it was the fact that you were singing while you were playing, which when I started trying that, I began to appreciate how difficult it is because of the different rhythms you have to keep track of. So anyway, I certainly was surprised by that, and also how you put very interesting fills, insert them in places that make the listener sit up and take notice and say, "Wow, that was cool! How did you do that?" So anyway, it probably was a Blind Pilots gig, but I couldn't swear to it.
So I just bring it up because it was making me think you probably had started taking lessons from our mutual friend Steve around that time. And yeah, you know what I did in that scene, I know a handful of singing drummers. One jumps to my mind right away, Dennis Dove. He has the voice of a bird. He's just a beautiful singer, and he's a very respected player as well, drummer. He played with Laura Price, so you probably recognize that name.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a great singer. And I know there's some others. I just don't know a lot of them. So, yeah, those were fun times. And, one of the other things that we have talked about, I'm just kind of curious, maybe this is a complete sideline now in light of the fact that there are virtually no live performances going on, or not very many. I do have a friend in Sarasota, Florida, who spoke with me for the podcast just this week. He is going to do his first live gig this coming Saturday, and so today, for reference for those listening in the future, is May 15, 2020, and he's going to be doing his first live performance since the kind of shut-in or I just refer to it as quarantine. And it is a tough decision for him. He said, he wants to do the right thing and not risk, his family's health, those of his friends, people that might come out and see. So he's got mixed feelings about, promoting the gig. And we talked about, well, I suppose it's just adjusting your language a little bit, and respecting that some people are going to be concerned. But anyway, what I was going to say is that we had discussed a lot in the past, and I don't know if it's something you want to talk about, but there are these constant changes of direction with venues, and something I call the landscape of music venues in any given market, like in the Bay Area in your case. Just things change. I was reading through an old email today, not that old, but maybe a few weeks. But you were talking about a time in the not too distant past where you were dealing with a booking agent, had done work for this nice gig you were looking forward to. I don't recall if you said the band actually got to play it, but that when the season came around, the booking agent was gone. There was someone new there, and suddenly everything that you'd worked on doing was kind of done. So, in spite of that, I see you, instead of dwelling, maybe you dwell a little, but instead of dwelling on these kind of challenges, you are constantly thinking of, what can I do differently? What should I be doing differently? And you start looking at different opportunities. You start looking at how to improve the marketability of the band. Are you still in that mindset? And maybe you aren't. Changed a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you're really describing is two different facets of getting a gig. One is the making the contacts, and the other is the presentation itself. And I hate calling booking agents up. They never return your call. Well, sometimes, but it's rare. So I always go to present in person. And the trick is to find out when that person's there. Now, if you, let's say, call up a winery, you usually get the receptionist or somebody in the tasting room, and you'll tell them what your business is, and they'll say, well, our booking agent is only in such and such. Well, if they give you a day and time, you can go there. But I think the key to promoting a band is there's tons of bands out there. What you have to do is make yourself distinctive. And I've tried to do that by going and seeing people in person, because booking agents have told me, yeah, we get guys calling here all the time, and we just can't. But if you're there in person, you can make a much better impact on the booking agent. So I try to do that. It's not always possible, but I really try. And then when I go, I have a very I think, classy brochure that I have assembled with pictures of all the guys in the band in them. And under each picture is a write-up that I've done for each of the musicians. And the write-ups I have tried to make humorous. And I've gotten a lot of comments about that. Now, somebody reading a brochure like that doesn't expect to see that. They expect to see superlatives about your band. Well, that's crap. Everybody's the greatest. So I try to make it humorous, and so they'll remember that. And also, I have things like where we have played different venues, and I include a list of our performance tunes, and I include a letters of recommendation from other venue owners that we've played at. And this is full color stuff, at least for the photos and some of the other stuff. And I have all of our contact information in it. And then when I go to the booking agent, I have that with me. And I also I've ordered 2 boxes of coffee mugs with our logo decal on one side and our contact information on the other side. So what I try to do is make an impression on them by the brochure and then the coffee mug, because that coffee mug will always be sitting on their desk or in their kitchen or something, and they're always reminded of our band then.
That's great.
And then I have our information about links to our videos on YouTube, and so if they want to hear us, all they have to do is click on that.
May I ask where you got the coffee mugs, where you ordered them from or had them made?
Well, I don't want to say, because the decals were not top quality, so I wouldn't want you to order from them.
But they still work.
Yeah, but yeah, they don't know that in a year the decal is going to be looking shabby or something. So
that's a reminder that we all look shabby after another year.
yeah, I hate looking in the mirror, dude. I'll tell you that. But this way you have the chance to present in person and make a better impression. And what I usually do with my meeting a booking agent is the first 10 minutes I talk about nothing musical. I just do chit chat to try to give the impression that just a regular guy, just and not trying to jam something down their throat. And eventually I get around to it and say, we have a band. We've been playing a lot of the different venues around here. Love to play here. Let me show you this brochure. You can take a look at it later and go from there on it. But I like to warm up the client with some idle chit chat. Maybe ask him if he's got kids, or ask her if she's where's she from originally, and that sort of thing. It's just meaningless conversation, but it gets people at ease.
I was going to ask you, how does the conversation start? So how long does this part of the meeting go before you get down to business, so to speak?
Oh, I'd say maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 at the most. Because they've got other things to do, and you're just trying to get them on the same wavelength as you are, from a social standpoint, so they're relaxed and comfortable.
Sure.
But I had a comment from one of the venues that I know you've played, because I've seen you over there in Sunnyvale on Murphy Street. Mm-hmm. And the guy that does the booking there, he never goes in. So I dropped off the brochure and a coffee mug for him. And he called me up a week later and said, "Dude, we want you to play." And I said, "Well, great." He saw the brochure. He says, "I've never seen a brochure like that before in my life from a band." He says, "You put a lot of extra work in this, so yeah, we're going to give you a shot." So it's definitely you don't have to do it the way I do, but it's definitely a method to get their attention and convince them that you're for real. That's mainly what it is.
Yeah. I love that. And I'm kind of inherently lazy about going to see people sometimes, but I've always known that making an in-person appearance can really matter. But you clearly gone the extra mile with the swag drop off and and the humorous bios, and that's not an easy thing for people. I mean, one thing I was told, I think it was in college or something. I was told, look, it's not easy to write humorously, so be careful. But you're pretty darn good. You also, another thing you do in your emails to your email list for like gigs or whatever, there's always a great setup. There's a guy that's been on the podcast named Ray Prim who's based in Austin, and I haven't checked him out lately, but he does something similar, but on Facebook. I should find out if he's still doing it and point you to his profile so you can see. But he'll have this huge setup about something completely non-related, and then and by the way, suddenly he's telling you about his gig, and it's always really clever how he does it. And your emails, though, are very much that way. So certainly, I guess the takeaway is if you have writing talent, or at least you've gotten the feedback to that degree that of it.
You don't want to try something that you're not really that skilled at, because then it's going to go flat. But for example, when we were playing the Boulevard Tavern before they tore that down, I always send out a what I hope is a humorous gig by email to all of our followers of the band and people who aren't followers, but I hope will become followers. And I think I had one email that said, by the way, I started singing about 2 years ago, and I'm only up to about 15 tunes right now. But anyway, I really enjoy it. And so I said, well, you want to come to this gig because it'll be my singing debut. I said, I actually had one other gig where I sang, and it was my first time, and I set a record of 13 100ths of a second to empty the entire room when I started singing. So anyway, that it was, it's just a silly thing, but it gets people's interest, and I think they mainly go over pretty well.
Yes, most definitely. I mean, I haven't had the pleasure of seeing one lately for obvious reasons, but your writing is at a level where anytime you say anything remotely, by the way, I don't mean this to say that you never say anything nice to me, because that's totally not true. But anytime you say anything remotely complimentary of my writing, I'm like, all right, I'm getting it. Dave is appreciating some of the things I write. It means a lot. So, well, that's great that you're utilizing that. And I know, I don't know, I said I wasn't going to do any editing, but I always have to kind of trim the beginning of the recording because we're kind of just shooting the breeze, so to speak, at the beginning. So I'll cut some of that out. So in case it wasn't there, you got stuck in Hawaii for a few weeks, and I noticed that you were out, talking to venues, kind of trying to get to know the local musician scene in anticipation that you were quite possibly going to take your band to Hawaii sometime for some gigs there. And we talked about what a nice little, while it may not be a big moneymaker, maybe it would do okay, but everybody's got big flight expense, but there's a great resume thing and would be a good time. I love that you were making use of the time that way. And you had also described that the venues were a little taken aback, as in like, well, we're not doing gigs, dude. But you had to state the obvious, like, hey, I'm thinking ahead here.
Yeah, yeah. To just kind of supplement what you said, I have made an effort to um, uh, make friends with a lot of the local musicians there, because I can tell you what's probably going to happen is the chances of getting everybody in the band over there at the same time for a week is going to be that's going to be very difficult. So I'm going to have to bring maybe a guy or two in to substitute for whoever it is that can't make it. I mean, that happens all the time in bands anyway. But I'd like for us all to go. And even if we don't make any money, the thing is, how's that going to look in the brochure? Like, geez, these guys were invited to play in Hawaii. It's going to give us a kick upstairs.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, speaking of the brochure again, I would love it if you could share some version of it with me so that I can make it available, some form of it available for listeners to just see, like, well, what the hell is this guy doing that makes this brochure look so great? So that would be awesome if you can. Maybe we can talk about that after.
Yeah, I'd be happy to send it down. And, I can do it electronically, but I think it would be better to send you a paper version. But whatever you prefer is fine.
Well, send me the e version, and I'll pick up a hard copy next time I see it, because it'll.
Or you could just print it out if you got an e version.
Yes, I can do that. I can do that for sure. So, what is your feeling on the immediate future of the band? Is it just sit and wait, or are you already sort of thinking about what's likely to happen?
Well, I think the quality of the gigs we're getting in the last year or two have definitely improved. For example, I think last September we played a political fundraiser for a lady running for political office up in Placerville, and Placerville's 100 miles from where we live. The guys in the band, and they had to pay for our transportation, our lodging, and our compensation for playing the music as well. And it's hard to get. Well, it's unusual for somebody to want to spend that much money to get a band. But there's other bands up there, but they had been down here and heard us, so they wanted us to play. Mm-hmm. And we played a wedding in Mendocino, and we played a 80th birthday party down in Orange County, and there we were compensated very well for that gig, and including lodging and everything else. And they brought in a professional sound and lighting company to do that for us, and had a nice stage set up. So that's the kind of gig that I'm angling towards, that I think will give us a greater visibility, enable us to get even more of those gigs.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan that we had talked about. So you're really, just sounds like here we are. Gosh, I don't know. We're still weeks into this whole quarantine thing, as I like to refer to it, since it isn't actually quarantine where I live. But you're just looking toward when it does happen, which I love. I think it's almost all we can do. I was writing. I'm a little late on getting this week's email out, but I was writing. I've been watching a lot of former guests and friends do live streams. And, it's open for some of them. It's new, and it's opening up a whole new world. And at the same time, it's a little strange, right? Because it's not the norm, and they're not having the same human interaction. But I was just contemplating today, because I've been thinking about it. So what happens to, the drummer, the bass player, whatever, who's not a songwriter? Like a lot of these guys that I'm watching, and women. They're songwriters, they're singers, they're guitar players, or whatever they are, and they can do a one-person show. Whereas me, could I conceivably do something like that in the future? Maybe. I'd have to work really hard to get a repertoire up. I can post, a song now and again on YouTube playing acoustic, but I know that's not the case for everyone. Not everyone, who plays drums, plays guitar, or even sings.
Yeah.
But I've been thinking a lot about that, and I was kind of curious to know, and it may be something you've absolutely not even looked at, but I was curious to know if you'd been thinking about, could we do something in the online, the streaming space in the future before venues around? I will, and before you share your thoughts on that, I will tell you what I have seen is that some venues, for the benefit of their employees and the music that they had supported, are opening just for entertainers or an entertainer to come in, no patrons, to keep it, safe and
yeah.
They will live.
Oh, that's interesting. I have not heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and they'll live stream shows. So maybe that's something for you to pitch. Now, there's still the issue of, well, what about these, 5 guys that are in here that aren't, maybe aren't able to do the social distancing thing while they play. But I don't know. There are some things that I think can be done for, people who, like I said, can't pick up the guitar and sing a show, for a half hour.
Yeah. Well, I guess I hadn't even ever considered anything of that sort, and I certainly would not attempt a one-person show because I don't play guitar. I used to play guitar, but my fingers are pretty much damaged from arthritis, and I can't get the fingers on the fretboard anymore where I need to play. And besides, when I was playing guitar, I stunk anyway. So I would not attempt that. And nobody wants to hear a bass solo. Nobody. So that would be out for me. So it would have to be a small ensemble. And I would like to know more about the mechanics of doing that, and where your target audience is, and how you contact them and set these things up. So you had mentioned doing house concerts. That's apparently different?
Well,
right?
Yeah, so we can't, we can't go do the in-person thing at the moment. I know that some of the streaming things that are going on are for private in-home type of things, but everybody's in their own home. So there are a lot of different options. So if you were able to put yourself into an ensemble situation there, and you don't even have to do that. Now I think this gets more, logistically, gets more challenging because every ensemble member has to have the setup for it. But, I have seen some collaborations where, musicians are all in different locations. That's harder, but yeah, we'll definitely talk offline if you're interested about. There's a company that makes a line of products called iRig that essentially allow you to deliver the sound that you're actually experiencing. Like, for instance, if you were playing in your home with the full sound setup, these affordable little devices allow you to deliver that sound through your camera, instead of, like, if you were using your iPhone, which has a great camera but isn't necessarily going to capture the awesome sound that may be happening in the room there. But it allows you to do that. And then there's just a ton of platforms. Obviously, Facebook is a really easy one, and there's a lot of ticketed ones. And the big thing, that I think a lot of people are learning, that many had learned many, many months ago, is the online apps for accepting payments for tips.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. And yeah, we should talk more about that. And I'll definitely make that, if we do that, I'll make that thread available to the community so they can take away any tips. It's been fascinating and fun to watch.
So, when you first asked me if I were interested in being interviewed for your podcast, I was thinking about different things, and like, do I have anything to say that's worthwhile or not? And there are a couple things that might not be obvious to the typical person out there trying to promote his or her band. So if you want, I can just give you a couple of these things that your listeners might be interested in.
Do it.
And one is that when you're working with a venue, that's your client, and you treat them like a client. And to treat them like a client, what you're trying to do is bestow some value on that client. And in bars and restaurants, that is typically kicking their business up from where it was because you were there to play music. In other words, you're enhancing their revenues, you're driving their business. And so you always have to bear that in mind. And also, you have to communicate to the venue owner or whoever you're interfacing with there that your purpose in being there is to do that. And so if you're entertaining and you can bring some folks with you, then that will go a long ways to get invited back. And the second thing is you need to be generous with your venue owner. You don't necessarily cut it off right exactly at 10:30 or 11 o'clock or whatever it's supposed to be. You always give more than you get. And the owners will appreciate that. I know a couple of folks have remarked about that, and venue owners. So that's another area where you can sort of pave the ground for getting invited back. And a third is what I like to do is keep a little patter going between the tunes, not every two tunes, but take some time to say something like, okay, I got a quiz for you guys. How did Buffalo Springfield get their name? And then you go through that and let them guess, let them talk. They like talking in front of other people, I'm sure, and they've got stuff that might be interesting to add also. But ask them, tell them you're going to have a little quiz, and the winner of the quiz will get a backstage pass to the band that they can use after the show's over.
Nice.
So it's and then I like it when Gary, for example, calls up one of the many women that are always up hanging around his neck and letting them sing a chorus into the mic. You never give the mic up, but you can point it in their direction. And then Alan will, on occasion, hand a tam to one of the people that's up there listening, and they have a ball with that. So it just feeds on itself. Everybody's having a good time then. And, the owner's over there behind the bar or wherever, or wherever you're playing and watching this, and he's seeing or she's seeing people having a great time and jiving to the music. So those are some other things that I like to do that I think help in yourself having fun. And when you have fun, the audience will, and it's more likely you get invited back to play.
I couldn't agree with you more. And also hearing you recommend these things is just a great reminder that, people are there to have fun and they can have more fun if you let them. So,
yeah.
Good stuff, Dave. Well, listen, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm glad we finally made this happen. So your band, Severe Pleasure, where is the best place for people to find out what you guys do? Is that on your website or on Facebook?
It's the website is kept up to date. I finally got somebody who is really conscientious to do it, and so it's www.severepleasurerocks.com.
Nice. I'm typing
And
right.
it's got a profile of the musicians on there, and but it's got our gig schedule on there too. So and contact information.
Cool. I like it. Yeah, I
And
see.
it's got links to our videos on YouTube. Now, there's I don't mean to encroach on your time here too much, but there's one other thing that I think I've been thinking about doing that I think would really be a good thing to do to really promote the band, and that is instead of directing people on our website to recordings we have had made with a cell phone at a live gig, we should go into a studio and record all of this stuff and then put that on the website. It would be so much better. But that's probably going to be down the road because it's not cheap,
Yeah. Well, just bear in mind that recording, home recordings become so accessible. So there's probably someone in your neighborhood there who can help you guys do a nice recording, and you don't necessarily have to be at a big studio. But yes, it can be a little.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea, Dave.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me on.
Of course. Yeah. I you know what? You're on here because you're an inspiration and a big supporter, like I said, and I really appreciate that. But I think you are a great inspiration to anyone who wants to play or is trying to figure out aspects of getting out, performing live or whatever it is, promote their band better, pick up a new instrument. And there's a lot of other cool things that you've talked to me about with regards to music. So yeah, I think it's been great having you on here and being part of the conversation.
Well, for me, it's been a severe pleasure.
Bada bing, he's going to be here all night, ladies. Hold on.
All right, my friend. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Have a great weekend. Hey, thanks again for listening. If you are loving the podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn about the various ways that you can offer your support. And again, if you're a listener, I consider you a supporter, especially if you shared it with a friend. Thank you. Look for show notes and links to most everything mentioned in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. If you have feedback, comments, suggestions, or questions about the podcast, my guests, me, please visit my feedback page at unstarvingmusician.com/feedback. You can leave me a quick voicemail right there in your browser. You can also email me from that page. Thank you for listening and sharing with your musician friends. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love. Hey there, just one last thing before you go. Music artists and other creators are always facing hurdles and obstacles, and life, as we know, can be a bit unpredictable, to say the least. I'm here to help. Explore the opportunity to work with me in a coaching capacity and to pay only what you can afford. Just go to unstarvingmusician.com/coaching. There's a button on that page to schedule a 15-minute consult call with me on which we'll figure out how and if I can help. And if we both feel good about it, we'll make it happen. I'll also answer any questions you have about how it works, including the pay what you can afford thing. Obviously, there's only one of me, so I do have a limited number of slots at any given time. So if this sounds like something you can use right now, go to unstarvingmusician.com/coaching to learn more or to get started. Ciao.